let's go.
Bunch of monkeys running around looking for their lunches. They scream and shout and they howl at the moon, but they can't escape the dream. They thunder rock and it buzzes and clicks, and it's not of this world. They try to set it on fire, but they see themselves in the flames. Apes on tape. Apes on tape.
Hi, I'm Bryn,
I'm Jer.
and welcome to Apes on Tape, the only podcast where you are the star.
Well, I mean, they're not really the star, though. I mean, we're the ones on the show. So.
Yeah, I guess we're the stars of the show.
Yeah.
I mean, but we have a guest today,
Yeah.
Christina Martin. We're talking about astrology.
Hi, I'm Christina Martin. I'm a spiritual teacher, author, and astrologer, and you can find me on YouTube and ChristinaMartin.com. I love to help inspire people to reach their highest potential. And one of the ways I do that is through astrology.
It's very interesting. So, like, what is astrology?
Through my experience, I feel like astrology is a sacred and ancient science and art form and divination tool. It's not an exact science, which I'm sure we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
And it really is, it's a master navigation tool that helps you discover who you are beyond the veil of ego. So I really believe that the stars are a map of our soul, and they are our true clock, they are our true calendar, and they show us the greater cycles of time. So you can look to the ancient Vedas, for example, to see where we really are in time. So right now we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the Dark Ages, which is why so many like horrible things are happening, or that's what some people believe.
Interesting. I always thought of astrology as like a bunch of people, like tribes and such, standing around and looking for the best times in their life to do things, like trying to find a way about how to make decisions in a difficult world. And what early people, when they became cognizant, did is they would often like look up to the stars as like a scholarly venture.
Well, the thing about it is that so many different cultures were using constellations so much for navigation and for, you know, like they marked events, they marked all these different things. It's like using the stars for that was so prevalent that it just made sense for these cultures to also assume that the stars had an effect on our
personalities, because it has an effect on everything. Like it has an effect on agriculture. It probably does have an effect on personality traits. So for example, if you're born in the fall, supposedly because of like harvest and like the way that your parents were eating, you're less likely to have depression. You're less likely to get bipolar disorder. And apparently you can be like irritable. And this is like a science piece in like Time magazine said that. And in fact, a Harvard study says that if you're born in January, you have a better chance of getting like grades in school and like academic pursuits, because it actually makes you older than everyone in your class for that school year.
Yeah.
So like things in our society are like when you're born does affect your life.
Yeah.
I think whether or not, you know, astrology is like the grand navigator of personalities or a soul determining thing. I think that seasons really do play a big role.
Yeah, I mean, seasons for sure. I mean, like even Neil deGrasse Tyson, when he was asked about astrology, or has been asked about astrology probably on numerous occasions, he responds usually with this remark about circumstances surrounding where and when you were born, and like the nutrition available and the season that it is, and this sort of stuff, and like how all that kind of expounds and creates like almost a butterfly effect thing that sort of like shapes people's personalities in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like there's something to that for sure.
You can even think of it like astrology in terms of the elements. So in nature, there are the elemental forces of creation: air, earth, water, fire. And each element
those are all the signs, like the signs that encompass like 3 signs each.
Yeah, so there's a cross on a natal chart, and there are 3 Let me just explain that.
There's 3 signs under each elemental sign, right?
There are 3 signs under each elemental sign.
Yeah.
So, like, for fire, Leo, Aries, Sagittarius, those would represent fire. For air,
What are some of the characteristics that they have, the fire signs? Apparently, they're like super in your face. Would you say that they're like in your
So,
face,
yeah,
or like dramatic, or extroverted, active?
basically, like, if you think about fire in nature, you can just look at it and you see that it's constantly moving and it's constantly going. So a lot of people who have a lot of fire in their chart, and it's not just about the sun sign, right? It's like, what is your moon sign, or what is your Venus, and what are all these different things?
Like,
And
these are just sun signs.
then
They're
you
like
have
just general.
and then you
things.
have basically have a certain alchemical template that you can look at, and then you can see, well, I have this much fire, I have this much water, I have this much earth, and that will kind of determine your personality in a way, because it's like basically the elements in nature, we're not separate from them, they create us.
What would you say to a person who is like an earth sign like me, but I'm like incredibly vivacious and like all over the place all the time, and exhibiting like really fire sign traits?
I read your chart, and I know that your Mars is in Aries retrograde, the same as mine, so you're very passionate and fiery, so you're projecting that a lot. So it's not just about your sun sign, right? It's about a lot more.
It's about your moon sign and what's the other one? Your rising sign or your ascendant sign?
Yeah, so basically, like, the rising sign is your
outer personality.
Your outer personality, your soul purpose for this lifetime, your role here, like, your specialty in this lifetime.
Is it like, so it's almost like a pinnacle point, like that's sort of like what you specialize in?
You're moving toward that. It's basically what your soul's moving toward, yeah.
Interesting. So like my rising sign's in Aries? Is that what you're saying?
No, your Mars is in Aries.
My Mars is that's a different thing. That has to like do with houses and stuff. So yeah, apparently your sun sign is the one that the horoscopes read you out, and it's very general. Your sun sign is your general traits. Your moon sign is your inner personality.
It's how you relate to people emotionally, and it represents your past lives and where you've come from.
Oh, interesting. And your rising sign or your ascendant is like where you're moving towards as opposed to coming from. Interesting, because I just thought it was just outer personality. So are these sun signs and moon signs and rising signs all to do with birth, or are they what astrologers use to define your horoscope on that day?
It has to do with the exact time that you were born and where you were born, yeah.
Okay, so how does an astrologer make a horoscope for a day? Like a particular day? Like I could have a horoscope that's like today, like whatever date it is, it's the 12th of February. Is it the 12th of February?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay,
so
sorry.
Like,
Was I reading
there's
that
something
right?
called transits, which translates to...
On the 12th of February, you will be very forgetful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the 12th of February, you cannot read
well, actually, right now, Mercury
date.
and Neptune are in Pisces, so we are a little like all over the place with our thoughts. But basically, transits are where the planets
I mean, so
are.
am I, though.
Yeah, this is for the collective consciousness. But I'm talking about like how transits
Yeah,
are basically.
Jeremy.
No, just let me finish. Okay. Transits are where the planets are in space right now, and then depending upon your natal chart or your sign, they're going to affect you differently, right? Because they're going to be aspected to your natal chart in a different way, and they'll affect you in a different way.
They're like superpositioned over your natal chart.
You can superposition it over, and you can read it that way, or you can look at it from a collective viewpoint.
Interesting.
Okay, a lot of assertions being made. I wanna interject here with my first big questions. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So my first big question is with respect to all these different details that surround the art of astrology and whatever. It's just kind of like the big why. You know what I mean? Like, so when Mars is in your whatever house and like this happened, like, and then they say that means this. Why does it mean that? Or who decided that it means that? Or who discovered that it means that? And how did they discover that it means that? There's all these things going on that they say there's all these assertions that astrologists make about your personality or about like what would be going on in your life at particular times based on these, on these terminological interactions between, the nomenclature that's involved in astrology. But I'm curious as to like how that all came about. Like, what is the story behind all that?
Is it a mystery or is there an actual...
Astrology dates back to ancient Babylonia and Egypt. The Vedic cultures used astrology. The Mayans used astrology in order to know themselves, in order to navigate, like we were talking about before. There were no lights, so the stars were their navigation tools.
They thought it had significance that way, so why not significance with personality traits?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly how they created the language, but it is a language, and just like any other language with symbols, you can learn to read the symbols, and then you can learn to interpret it. So astrology is also kind of like a form of magic. When you look at the symbols, especially if, for example, like a planet is in a certain auspicious sign, like right now Jupiter is in Sagittarius, that's its home planet, home, that's Jupiter's home. So this is a really great time to create income, and this is a really like wonderful time for creating wealth right now. So if you were to focus on the symbol of Jupiter, which is like this 4 with a cross, you could kind of program your subconscious or just direct energy in a certain way, and that would be a form of magic. So people can use it in that way. They use the symbols of astrology, or they use it as a way to learn more about themselves. It's an ancient art form, right? And it's not an exact
Do you think that the
science,
Mayans had it like that specific at that time when we're talking about the origins, like Jeremy was?
I think they did. I have a little bit of information about how they basically set up certain structures to align with the stars. So this is from a book called, sorry, let me find the book.
Yeah, this is the information that we have now about astrology, but
Yeah.
maybe it's not so specifically how they practiced it
Yeah,
back
so-
then. As she's saying, it's like hard to know what
So-
they were thinking.
Yeah.
There's a book called
Jala. It's
There's
called
a book
gelatinous.
called Galactic Alignment by John Major Jenkins, and this was actually a book that one of my good friends now, he was a mathematician and everything, he didn't believe in astrology, he read this book and now he's an astrologer, so I highly recommend it if you're curious about the roots of astrology and improving it and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So basically, a quote is, the Maya intended 2012, the end date of the 13 back-tune cycle of their long count calendar, to target the rare alignment of the solstice sun with the galactic center of the Milky Way. They encoded this alignment into their basic institutions: hero, twin, creation myth, king, ascension rites, sacred ball game. Chichen Itza recognized the future 2012 alignment of the sun with the galactic center, which opposes the Pleiades. The galactic center is between Sagittarius and Capricorn in the sky. The anti-center is in the Pleiades.
But the Mayans didn't have like our model of the universe
Yeah,
figured
they
out.
also
So
thought
how?
we were at the center of it.
Yeah, they thought that we were the center of it.
Yeah.
So how could have any of their readings really been accurate?
That's a good point. I don't know, but basically they predicted this major event like thousands of years into the future, which basically people called 2012 like this end times or whatever. But they basically saw that there was,
was
gonna
like
be
an
this
awakening or
alignment
something.
of like
Yeah.
the chakra system in the sky. So they basically were under the impression that they were connected to the stars, and the stars were a reflection of them, and there was really no separation. There was the microcosm reflects the macrocosm and things like that.
Yeah, so they were very in tune, and they were very studied onto it. They were very they kept very good records. It's commonly thought that the Mayans pretty much had the stars figured out in more detail than other people.
Like to an exact point, though, they
had.
would like put their structures to align with certain stars, like maybe to draw on the energy. Like who knows, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, you're saying that you think the Mayans were right about 2012, correct?
As they predicted a major alignment of the galactic center and the anti-center and the Earth. So it was some kind of like portal or something that would send energy through the Earth and
What
upgrade
evidence
us.
do we have to believe that happened? though?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like science only goes so far. Science is based on the physical five senses, and at a certain point, you have to go beyond that in order to really know the truth. So it's like the best example I can think of, and I really thought hard because I knew you guys were going to talk to me about this.
Yeah.
Was like, okay, in meditation, you can, or like, say if someone asks you like, oh, prove the energy body, or like prove that meditation works, or like like what's all the spiritual stuff. You can't necessarily like quantify it with science. You go into it and then you experience it and then you just know it. So in the same way, you have to kind of tune yourself.
Well, there's a lot of scientific studies on meditation though, and the effect that it
Yeah.
has on the human body, and like they put monks in MRIs and things like that to sort of show.
And you see
like, this is-
marked differences.
Yeah,
But there's no a similar way to know that like a free flow of galactic energy shot
like
through the Earth at a particular
in
point
terms
in
of like the
time.
Mayan calendar thing. Yeah, it was like, so what happened exactly, and how do we?
And
know
I had
what
heard that the
happened?
Mayan calendars were actually like somewhat inaccurate as well. I'm very impressed by the way that the Mayans studied the stars, and I think that people really did study the stars, as we said, because the stars were so important to every aspect of their lives, their navigation, their agriculture, their everything, and it was about navigation. And so it's an ancient. I mean, you still really can't dispute that it's like an ancient form of navigation, and the stars were used as navigation. It was also used to navigate your personalities and the people around you. I think that if you look at all of the personality traits that across all of the signs that astrologers have put into various signs, you actually, if you're not trying to predict anything, you've actually just cataloged every human trait. And I think that that's actually kind of remarkable. And so once you know about these human traits, right, and you've marked down these human traits, you can attempt to now navigate human traits using the stars. And I think that's why they mapped those characteristics to those stars, because it's human pattern making.
We personify things
Yes.
in order to understand them, in order to know ourselves more fully, right?
I mean, Carl
Well
Carl
said.
Jung was a astrologist, or he was interested in astrology.
Who's
in any
Carl?
case.
Who's Carl Jung?
He's a
Carl
famous
Jung is
psychologist.
Yeah, he's a very famous psychologist. He's the one who came up with the whole concept of like introverted and extroverted. Like he
Oh,
basically
yeah.
he did a lot of like developmental work on personality traits and personality trait theory. And like part of that was his interest in astrology, and he did like some studies on it and whatever else. And like there are claims that he was a believer. I haven't done a ton of research on that, but yeah, like people say that like he was an astrologer.
Interesting. So like, and here's the thing, like people for a very, very long time in high academic circles were very into astrology. Like, so I have a very brief history about the academic longevity of astrology. So it started, apparently, me and Jeremy have different sources on this, but he says it's the 2nd century BC, and I was told it was the 2nd millennium BC, so 2,000 years before Common Era, all the way until about the 1800s. It was like full force, as important as like as navigation or like politics, and it was their physics.
It was
very
basically synonymous with astronomy. Wasn't
yeah,
it?
it was like it was their astronomy. It's the way that they understood everything about the stars. And until the 1800s, where they're actually like out there navigating boats and stuff, they would use the same sort of knowledge that they had of space to navigate themselves and their personalities. So it was accepted it was a scholarly tradition. It was accepted in political and academic contexts until around 1800. Right? I'm inferring that one of its functions was to have a way to understand space. What stopped this very recently was Newtonian physics, which is a completely different model of space and physics, and actual astronomy. These two things came around 1800. Around that time, also
Right.
the scientific method.
Yeah, Galileo came along and he was like,
I mean, the Renaissance, I think, maybe somebody can fact check me, but it was between the 1600s. It was like, I think it was went from the 1600s into the early 1800s. And in the Renaissance, Christina will be happy to know, in the Renaissance, just a beautiful time for art and thinking. Renaissance scholars commonly practiced astrology. But unfortunately, during the Enlightenment, intellectuals started to lose sympathy for it. So by the end of the 1800s, following the development of the scientific method, astrology had been challenged on both theoretical and experimental grounds. Do you guys want to take a quick commercial break?
yeah, it sounds about right.
All right,
Okay.
we'll be back after a word from our sponsor,
Our totally legitimate sponsor.
Baltimore State University.
Here it is. Baltimore State University has been on a mission since 1871 to learn, to solve, but mostly to make money for our investors.
Working together to make life better, we grow here, inspired by the people, ideas, and opportunities that surround us, providing momentum for the owners of this university.
At BSU, we're dedicated to your community. As our online post-secondary monopoly takes the world by storm, we create solutions to life's biggest challenges, like making capitalism sustainable, while upholding the patriarchy.
We imagine a better world with like robots and shit, and we're determined to build it.
But don't just take it from us. Listen to some of our student testimonials.
It's a highly competitive world, and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I need a plan to learn how to be all that I can be, or pay someone to do my assignments for me. Because I'd rather sell my soul for a piece of paper than look like a piece of shit in the eyes of my peers.
I'm learning from award-winning faculty, and I'm supported by inspiring staff. They're always available after hours for late-night sessions so that I can improve my grades by sleeping with them. They're my BSU family.
There are hundreds of courses at barely affordable prices offered days, evenings, and weekends. I have no social life left to speak of. At BSU, I can become anything I dream of, and I dream of going into terrible debt in order to earn my master's in gender confusion studies.
When you think about college, it's easy to think of a building or a large classroom, exams, studying, getting fucked to death on piles of books, school spirit, quadrangles, and drinking excessively to numb the pain. College is, after all, a place where you're going to carve out your future.
But when you come to Baltimore State University, you realize it's much more than that. It's people meeting people, to compete savagely for scarce employment opportunities, learning from each other and growing together with only moderate amounts of sexual harassment.
It's not always about knowing exactly where you're headed. Sometimes it's about finding your way to crippling amphetamine addiction. It's about seeing the field with your own eyes and learning from the best. There are books, there are tests, there are classrooms, there is some getting fucked to death and quadrangles, but there's a very important part you can't put on paper.
It's living with social anxiety, because everyone else has a degree and you need one too. In fact, you need more than anyone else, so that we can work together to build something bigger than ourselves.
It's the relationships, it's the good conversation and good friends. It's expressing your gender confusion in the quadrangle. It's hard work, but it's lots of fun. So we go to college for the education, but in the end, what we take home is an indoctrination with controversial political views. BSU doesn't just create social justice warriors, it pits students against one another in a variety of issues, seeding anger in our hearts so that we can all be assholes to our loved ones. BSU is an experience, and at BSU, the experience is you.
Please be advised that BSU is not responsible for any incidents involving drug or alcohol abuse, stress-related suicide attempts, quadrangles, being fucked to death, or being fucked to death in the quadrangle. Provided you survive the overly complicated enrollment process and entry fees, rare crystals will be distributed on orientation day while supplies last. Please direct any and all questions pertaining to BSU directly to our dean at deanethamania@hotmail.com. If you do not receive a response within 24 hours, then perhaps you should learn to ask better questions. Bitch.
BSU. Come join us. Or die. And we're back.
Welcome.
Yeah, we're back with Christina Martin. And we're running out of time, so I think that we're just going to bombard Christina with questions about astrology.
All right. So
I'm ready for it.
Here's the first one. So there are a lot of different kinds of mysticism other than astrology, like chakras and auras and all these sorts of things. And I'm just wondering if you think or are aware of any sort of like unified picture of like how all these things sort of, like correlate to one another, because they all come from different parts of the world. You have all these different things, all like chi energy and like all these different things coming from different parts of the world. And yet people who consider themselves to be like new age spirituals typically kind of adopt them all. And, like, do they all work
Yeah, I
together?
totally know what you mean. And the new age spirituality can be a big trap because it's often very overly feminine and living in the la la land and not really based in science. And I think there has to be that balance of using your intuition, which astrology requires, and then looking at science and looking at astronomy and using both as navigation tools, because astrology can easily turn into a dogmatic religion where you're going, well, Mercury's retrograde, so I can't travel. And it's like, no, you can still travel. You just have to kind of be more mindful because the energy is just going to be a little bit different. The energy flowing through you and through consciousness
So
is
it's
going
not
to be a bit different.
so it's not so dogmatic where you would
Takes your free
you're
will
pegged.
away.
No,
Yeah, where it takes your
astrology
free will and
never
you're pegged
takes
in.
you away from free will. The stars are a reflection of what's going on in consciousness, and it's up to you to choose what you want to do with the energy that's being provided to you.
Right. Because if you read a horoscope, like a lot of them I have found in my research anyways, are very like directive. They're very like, you should do this. And it's just like, well, okay, so if I do that, then I'm just acting out my own self-fulfilling prophecy
Exactly.
here. And I'm like confirming that this person is right. Whereas if I just choose not to, have I thereby, like disproven the legitimacy of my astrological path or whatever?
Yeah,
Like,
horoscopes and newspapers are called mundane astrology,
Yeah.
and they're kind of a joke to actual astrologers, right? They're just kind of a novelty.
Yeah. Like I have 3 horoscopes right here. One of them says that my day is an enviable, One of them sort of like goes back and forth about I might have, financial success or romantic happiness, or they could be cleared away. Okay, there was a highlight of my day, and it would have been interesting if any of these horoscopes even touched on it.
Yeah.
If one of these three horoscopes said you will have financial success today, I would have been like blown away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a couple like I've been looking into these for a few days, and I've got a couple of them that are just like they basically just give you standard healthy living advice kind of stuff, and just like okay, whatever. I got one that I think you guys might find kind of entertaining though that just came up today. It was,
All right.
You probably feel especially sexy and passionate right now.
I know I do.
Erotic novels could
Oh, my.
appeal to you. Spend the night with your partner, and don't be surprised if you attract new attention.
Yeah.
Even if that partner is your hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like I don't know. There's like lots of kind of like weird, sort of random stuff like that, and then there's lots of like very general stuff. I didn't find any of my predictions that I like found online, anyways, to be particularly accurate or that they pertain to me in any way. But I mean, again, these are like sort of low
One
grade.
aspect of the entirety of your personality and soul.
Right. So, I mean, that was one of the questions I had actually is like, because I had thought about this. I thought about like, okay, well, so all these horoscopes are like, they're not really like resonating with me and whatever. I like the first counter argument to that I could think of was like, well, those are just bad horoscopes. But then couldn't you always say that? Like, how do you get around that? Like, what makes a good, like, accurate prediction or horoscope? And how do you like if you're like the average human being who just like is exposed to all the random shit that's on the internet all the time, how do you differentiate between like, okay, well, this is useful information to me and this is just some asshole spewing bullshit, so that I like go to their website?
I think you have to seek a little bit deeper for knowledge and then within yourself in order to learn how to use your intuition. And if something doesn't feel right, like if something's like, this is obviously like bullshit, you should
Walk away from it.
walk away. Yeah.
Okay, I like that answer.
How do you feel about this? I'm going to tell you about this scientific experiment that happened in 1985. So it was done by a famous scientist called Sean Carlson, and it included a committee of scientists and a committee of astrologers. So these were astrologers that were all considered by their peers to be like respected in the astrological community. To establish Carlson's credentials, he ran an observatory, like a major observatory, a Center for Particle Astrophysics at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and he was a chief observer of the Berkeley Automated Supernovae Search Experiment. Carlson's experiment involved 28 astrologers, and they were held in high esteem, as I said, by their peers. They agreed to do all these charts, like we were talking, like, because that's how these astrologers make their predictions the way that we described before. They superimpose these other charts over charts, and then they use their intuitions and they channel. So they agree to match over 100 natal charts to psychological profiles that were generated by the California Psychological Inventory, which is a standard and well-accepted personality test. And the astrologers themselves identified those personality tests as a scientific instrument that would best align with the type of information that they believed that they could divine from their art. So everybody was kind of in agreement. They were like ready to take the test. They were nominated by a geocosmic research facility. Like everybody was super into this. What happened was the study found that the astrologers were unable to match the natal charts to their corresponding personality tests better than chance. So
it was like a 50% success rate.
Well, no, the control is the people doing it just by chance. They're like randomly being like, yes, like this person will have XYZ trait.
Yeah.
I guess the one done by chance doesn't even really take into account the year that they're born.
What were they trying to match the charts up with? Personality trait test or
a
something?
personality trait test that would lend itself well to the kind of predictions that could be made by astrologers. So apparently the astrologers and these astrologers didn't do better than chance.
People guessing.
You're taking the person out of it though. Like astrology is a very personable practice for me. Like I'm reading the person's energy when I'm doing it. I'm reading the person's soul when I'm doing it. So
yeah, but that's the thing, right? Is that there's that, and then there's the scientific method.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And we've been
And
giving
those are different. Those are very different things.
we've been
I
giving a
guess.
lot of attention to the masculine and to the mind and to the physical and to science. And astrology is just another way of viewing the stars with the divine feminine, right? You're working with the immaterial, you're working inside rather than what you can see on the outside. So this has been going on for a really long time in our society. For thousands and thousands of years, a patriarchy has been ruling and everything. And in 2020, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are going to align in Capricorn. And this is like a really, really exciting big event for everybody on the planet because it represents the return of the divine feminine, which doesn't mean that, you know, we're all going to worship females. It's just, it basically means that we're going to
I feel
become
like we
more,
already do.
more balanced within,
I mean-
within ourselves and within in our society and things like this.
Certain
will be
females
more
will
accepted.
be worshipped. I mean, like,
Oh, well,
if,
yeah,
that
I mean-
were, if
Always.
that were on my
Obviously.
horoscope today, I would be
Yeah.
like, probably.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah.
So when you say that these planets are going to align in Capricorn, does that mean that like when you look up in the sky and you see the Capricorn constellation,
They're in there.
all
yeah.
the planets are within that alignment?
Yeah.
And this is something that astrologers confirm using like telescopes and
Yeah,
stuff. Or they
math,
just,
telescopes.
well, because I know that the charts that like sort of determine the trajectory of the stars and the planets and whatever that have been developed by astrologers. I mean, there's been claims that in my research, anyways, that that those trajectories are no longer necessarily accurate because like the angle of that the Earth is rotating at pivots slightly and like this sort of thing, right? So like there's like a 25-degree difference in terms of like like where all the stars should be in the astrological understanding of things versus what we actually observe in the lab. So like I'm not really
There might be a slight difference, but it's pretty apparent that this is going to happen.
okay.
Yeah. I've got some rapid fire questions for you, Christina.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you again for coming.
What is your
on
favorite color?
The show.
Purple.
So Christina, what's your sign?
I am a Libra cusp Scorpio, so I am half angel and half demon.
Oh wow. So
You're
what?
a Nephilim.
Yeah.
You're a Nephilim.
Is that what a Nephilim
Or a
is?
Libra in the day and a Scorpio at night. Whatever. Yeah, like a Nephilim. Well, I mean, in Devil May Cry, that's what it is.
Yeah. It's also in Diablo. Yeah. What turned you on to astrology? Like, was it something at an
I
early
was a really
age?
awkward, shy kid who didn't know how to interact with people socially, so I just watched everybody and observed people. And astrology helped me to figure out how to act like a normal human and connect to people. And so it became a master tool for me to know myself and to relate to other people.
And that's actually how I take it. I do take like a positive attitude towards astrology as a way to help people do that.
As a form of psychology, yeah.
Yeah, and in that I feel like it is a good. I know that Jeremy kind of disagrees.
I feel like it's kind of an egotism. That's the whole thing. Is like your understanding of yourself and of the cosmos involves the cosmos revolving kind of around you, and like everything is all about you.
Isn't that
Everything's
why
about
we're
you.
here, Jeremy? To discover the self.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm a big
Maybe.
proponent of let
Maybe,
the
I don't
kids
know.
play.
of what?
Of let the kids play.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes kids run around with scissors and shit and like poke each other's eyes out and do all
Yeah.
kinds of fucking weird shit. You have to supervise the kids too, man. You can't just like let kids run amok.
I think that astrology is a great jumping point to getting interested in the stars and getting interested in people. I don't think
Yeah,
that, I
that's
don't
a
think
good
it's the
point.
destination. I don't think it's the intellectual destination.
I would agree with that. I would also say that because there's so much that's caught up in it that like I say, like these newspaper column horoscopes and whatever, like there's that and other things that abound that are kind of bullshit, and therefore it can be very misleading for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it kind of leads you sideways, perhaps.
I think that astrology has purposely been hidden from us to keep us kind of asleep and under
Well, it's been
control.
very prevalent in our culture. For
It has.
Yeah.
It has. Like one of the one.
Yeah,
one,
as we
one more thing,
explained, it has a 4,000-year like lifespan.
Yeah.
in Washington, you can look this up on your own time, but Washington D.C. is a really interesting place to look at because it's all laid out in a pentagram, and it aligns with the stars, and it was built by Freemasons and all this stuff, and there's all this astrological symbols there, and you can go there or you can look at it on Google or whatever, and you can see that this stuff was like really prevalent. They knew what they were doing, and I'm not sure they're
Well, that's
There
just the esoteric nature of our government. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean they're right either, just because they're doing
Yeah, I
all
mean,
this,
there's
Yeah.
conspiracy stories.
numerology
I mean-
and whatever. They build things in all kinds of weird ways.
You have to
Yeah.
question why, though, right? Why is
Of
it being hidden
course.
from us, right?
Yeah, I mean the creators of the United States were like out of the Enlightenment, so there might have been some like rebellious scholarly and
That's a good point. Yeah.
intellectual circles within that, because it was falling out of fashion in the Enlightenment. But I think that it was still culturally palpable.
Hey, Christina, what would you say to somebody who is unsure or questions whether their astrological sign and the traits that are associated with it are an accurate description for them based on the fact that they feel they change from, so to say, introverted to outroverted at different points in their life and this kind of thing? Like, I feel like personally, actually, I feel like I have changed quite a bit from my teenage years and this sort of thing. And so, you know, like, regardless of what personality traits my astrological sign would say that I have, if I have flipped from one side of the coin to the other and maybe go through different phases in life where that happens multiple times and whatever, like, how do you...
It's not a static thing, right? There are progressions you can look at. So every year, your sun will progress 1 degree on the chart. So say if you were a 0 degree Sagittarius, in 30 years, you would be a Capricorn or whatever. So it's like,
Okay.
you can look at these things too. There's a lot more to it than just like, you were born this way and that's what you are. So for example, like aspects are really important when you're reading a natal chart. Squares talk about your weaknesses or your challenges that you're going to overcome in this lifetime. Sextiles point to your hidden talents or things that you're going to achieve, your gifts and things like that. And then trines are like what you've been working on through many lifetimes. They're your super gifts,
Yeah.
things that you just do so easily.
But
and
how
it's
do you
like,
explain like physical like trauma and how that affects a person and how that can flip somebody's personality over?
well, astrology can predict those traumas as well.
Yeah, of course they would, right? That's a good defense. So, well, I mean, I just want to ask more questions.
Just gonna bypass that question.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving along with more questions. So, what I want to know is who gets along with who and who doesn't get along with who.
Well, you can look at the elements, right? It's like water goes on fire and it puts it out.
Mm.
Air and water get together, they create steam. Fire gets together with their fire and there's a fucking explosion.
Mhm.
So it's like
There's no Earth doesn't do anything.
Well, Earth just sits there and everyone tries to hit it and like knock on it and it's like, no.
Yeah.
And it's like super grounded and that's its role.
Yeah. So, do you think that based on me and Jeremy's astrological signs, should we get along or shouldn't we get along?
Sagittarius and Virgo are both very mental signs, and they're both very opinionated.
Are they both Earth signs or no?
Fire and Earth?
Fire and Earth.
So I mean, like,
Jeremy
Earth
doesn't
can
really strike
feed
me as a
fire.
fiery person.
No,
Get the
but,
fuck out of here, Bryn. What are you talking about? I'm the fieriest person ever.
No, you're not, you piece of shit.
Break this window right now.
Yeah, but there's
Not
so much
before
more
I
to
I'll
do.
it.
break it.
Okay, settle down, boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the generalization problem where like there's just a lot of so like when I was looking at different like personality traits, like your astrological traits, I noticed that there are traits on basically any sign in any of the constellations that I could apply to me as much as my own. Like there were certain Sagittarius, because I'm a Sagittarius, and there are certain ones that don't apply to me. And then like, so for example, I'm looking at Capricorn right now. Typical Capricorn personality traits: ambitious, I would say so. Persistent, I can be, definitely. Realistic, sure. Sensitive, maybe. Practical, yeah. Disciplined, to some extent, yes. Like these are all things like they're so general, and like every trait is just a trait that everybody has to some degree.
Good
right?
point. And the truth of that is that we encompass all the signs. We just have them in different amounts.
Are you telling me I have to follow 12 horoscopes now? God.
Well, you can learn about them and you can learn which ones you're embodying. It's like, for example, this is one that really is useful for anybody on the planet. So you can look at your Venus and your Mars, your divine feminine and your divine masculine, and you can look at how those archetypes are inside of you and if you're expressing one or the other. So In shamanic astrology, males will project out their Venus onto the world in order to attract a partner, and women will project their Mars out onto the world in order to attract a partner if they're not in balance, right? And this causes all sorts of drama. So you can kind of like use it like that to come to balance.
Do you know offhand like what my Mars or Venus traits are?
I'd have to do the little calculations online.
Yeah, they actually have
fun.
to chart it out. But that's I like that you said that, because you actually encompass all of these characteristics, because that's really what I think it is that everybody has the potential to have all of these characteristics, and everybody does have all these characteristics in either like large or small amounts. So that I actually completely get behind, because I don't think that any person is just like one way or the other.
And can't change.
Yeah,
it's like you meet people and they're like they have a lot
view
of
of
air.
personality should have a well-rounded understanding of that.
Yeah, and it's like you meet people and they have a lot of air energy and they're talking all the time, right? Like everyone's going to be different. It's not like they can't be quiet or they can't be relaxed or they can't take action and be fiery. It's like they're just expressing different personality traits.
I think people want to see themselves in their signs too, to some extent. You know what I mean? There's this thing called the Barnum effect, where like you can give people any old horoscope or whatever, and like as long as it's sort of like this sort of this kind of general thing, and like mostly positive and whatever. Yeah, they want to see themselves in that, and I think part of that.
I'm looking at the fire sign. Like I'm looking at Aries, and I'm like, I want to be all that shit.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if I were a fire sign person, I would love to see all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't know, it gives us something, like, people just want to understand, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People want to understand, they want to know the future, they want all these things, and astrology can provide them with a perspective that sort of incorporates that. Mm-hmm. Again, whether I believe it has any legitimacy or not, it still, like, it provides the same kind of purpose of, like, other religions, except for it's not as religious, I guess I would say. Like,
I would view it more as a language, right? Just like in English, we're talking right now, words are symbols. They're pointing us toward a truth. We use it to convey meaning. You can look at astrology like a language that you can use to
communicate with
people and connect to people. It's not an exact science, no, of course not. But
on that note, what's your mnemonic devices? Do you have any mnemonic devices for like navigating this language?
I have a metaphor that I took from an astrologer called K. Pacha, and I will go over that now if you want me to.
Yes,
sure.
Please.
Definitely.
So basically, a good way to know the signs is to relate them to a plane crash. So,
well, that's morbid.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
well, it sticks out in your mind, right?
Yeah. So basically, if Aries crashed the plane because it rushes and acts without thinking, and goes like, "Wow, I'm here. I have a body," then Taurus says, "Okay, let me do that again. Sorry." If Aries crashed the plane because it rushes and acts without thinking, then Taurus says, "Wow, I have a body. I'm alive." The Gemini searches its direct environment to find food and shelter. Cancer creates a home and feels safe. Leo has some time to think about itself in the safety of home and starts to become self-aware. Virgo sees itself clearly and begins to refine and fix itself so it has something to offer others. Libra has had some time to refine its thoughts and knows itself well, so it focuses on others. Scorpio wants complete and utter union with another, the sign of the twin flames. Sagittarius wants freedom after being suffocated and pulled down into hell from Scorpio, and moves to...
So they've died now.
And moves to another island to expand the community. Capricorn moves to the city and sets up a political party and creates structure for a new world. Aquarius heads back to the island and creates an eco-community with high-tech and amazing art installations and music. Pisces chills out all over, meditating, creating art, going with the flow. And you can kind of look at the chart like there's a unconscious aspect of the chart, a conscious aspect, and the superconscious. And the signs just fit into that. So that's another way to think about it. The best way to get to know the signs is to just look at your chart and then look at the meanings of the signs and the houses and the planets, and then just use correlative thinking to put everything together. And just kind of use your intuition, and even ask the stars, like, what is your message for me in meditation? And you'll be surprised about what you might be shocked to discover some interesting things.
So if I was to go about either just like digging into my astrological signs online or just reading books or doing whatever, or if I was to just spend time meditating on this and whatever. Like say I decided I'm gonna do astrology. I'm gonna be Jeremy the astrology guy. What benefits do you think that would provide me as like in terms of like my practical? It's like because I could spend all that time that I'm gonna spend reading books and studying astrology and doing all these things. I could just spend that time working on my projects. I could do another podcast on another subject. I could, do all these different things and work towards what I'm actually trying to, establish in my life. So, like, what does astrology do to sort of,
It would guide
correlate
you.
It would
that?
guide you. It would tell
would
you
go to
when
a
to
person
act in
and they would-
alignment.
But I'm
When-
already. I feel like I'm
when-
already doing a lot of the
When
things
your
I need to
projects,
do.
when it would be in divine timing, right? There's a certain time to act, and there's a certain time to wait and be feminine and receive, and let the information come. And then there's a certain time to be masculine and just put your projects out. You don't have to follow the stars exactly, but if you're aware, and it's like you're aware of the energy inside of you, aware of the energy around you and what you're receiving, you can just flow with life a lot better, right? It's just a tool.
Or you could just ask Jeremy, and you could ask yourself.
But
if you were
Jeremy is-
if you were capable of asking yourself to what you should be doing,
Jeremy's
then
I do that all the
Jeremy might
time.
answer.
Jeremy's a Sagittarius, and they're the teacher of the zodiac, the philosopher, and they think they know everything. So I mean, he probably does. He doesn't need
See,
astrology.
Yeah.
anything I say now is
anything
like
he
that's
says.
an indefensible position that you put me in. That's not
It's just
fair.
a joke. It's just a joke.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. Anyways,
Got me again.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to just say?
I had a blast. Please find me on ChristinaMartin.com if you want to work with me.
Yeah.
Cool. That was great. Thanks, Christina. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
so
your
much for
presence
coming
here.
on. Actually,
I really enjoyed this a lot. I love you guys.
we love you too.
Yeah, we love you too.
Yeah. Well, that's it for us, guys.
Yeah, that's the show for today.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, we always appreciate everybody listening to the old podcasteroo.
Yeah, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace out, guys.
Peace out.
Awesome. That was fun.